Okay, I have no idea at what point it started. It stopped. I just finally noticed, oh, it has stopped. So I'm glad I looked. Um, so I am going to really fast. I'm not going to go through the whole thing, but anyway, um, Joseph comes to him. So I'm going to start from the top of Genesis 48 and assume that we know in 47 that he has come there, uh, and that uh, so we already know that Jacob is there. He's in Egypt. He's got there when he was 130. He's been there for 17 years in Egypt. Now, Genesis chapter 48, verse 1. It says, Now it came to pass after these things that Joseph was told, Indeed, your father is sick. And he took with him his two sons, Manasseh and Ephraim. And I'm just emphasizing that Manasseh is the oldest, Ephraim is the youngest. And Jacob was told, Look, your son Joseph is coming to you. And Israel strengthened himself. He sat up in his bed, right? Oh, good, my son's coming here. Then Jacob said to Joseph, God Almighty appeared to me at Luz in the land of Canaan, and he blessed me and said to me, Behold, I will make you fruitful, and I will multiply you, and I'll make you of you a multiple people, and I'm going to give this land to your descendants after you as an everlasting possession. So I'm saying, I'm giving you Israel, not Egypt, Israel, right? To quote that verse, it says, God said to him, Genesis chapter 35, verse 11. Here's where it happened. God said to him, I am God Almighty, be fruitful and multiply. A nation and a company of nations shall proceed from you. So you're going to be a nation, and then you'll be a company of nations, right? Shall spring from you, and kings shall come from your body, and the land which I gave Abraham and Isaac, I'm giving to you and your descendants after you, I'm giving this land. So he's reminding him that's our land. Egypt is not our land. I'm saying this to you, Joseph, because you look like you want to stay here. Because why not? You're a king in Egypt. You got all this power. You got all this land. But this is not our land, even though you don't feel attached to it. You haven't been there in years. That's our land. Okay. Genesis 48, verse 5. And now your two sons, Ephraim and Manasseh. And he says it in the opposite order. He says the younger son first and then the older son on purpose. Now your two sons, Ephraim and Manasseh, who were born to you in the land of Egypt before I came to you in Egypt. So he's saying your two sons were actually born in Egypt. Everybody else's sons were born in Canaan. Reuben and Simeon and Levi and all of my other sons, my 11 sons, all their children were born in Canaan. Your two sons were born in Egypt. So again, I see your attachment here. In Genesis 41, verse 50, it says, and to Joseph were born two sons before the years of the famine came. So there were 7 years of prosperity, 7 years of famine. So before the years of famine came, Joseph was born two sons. So, and I'm pointing this out because these are not little tiny kids. They have to be at least, so Jacob's been there 17 years, and they were born before the famine came. And the famine was 2 years before they got there. So that'd be 19 years. So at the very least, they're like 20 and 21, right? His sons. So, and to Joseph were born two sons before the years of famine came, whom Asenath, the daughter of Potipharah, who's a priest of Or, bore to him. So Joseph's wife was the daughter of the priest there in Egypt. So his wife is Egyptian, his kids are Egyptian, he lives in Egyptian, he's prosperous in Egypt, tempting to stay. Joseph called the name of his firstborn Manasseh, which means forgetfulness. It says, For God has made me forget all my toil and all my father's house. Like, I'm not even thinking about my father's house. This is before he knew he was going to see his brothers again and see his fathers again. I had this whole dream where they bowed down to me. That's not going to happen. He's thinking to himself, I made up that dream because God has made me forget. I'm here in Egypt. I haven't seen my brothers. I'm never going to see them again. I'm done. In fact, I named my son, I have forgotten my past. And the name of the second he called Ephraim, which means fruitfulness. It says, For God has made me fruitful in the land of my affliction. So at the time, he's seeing Egypt as the land of his affliction. But he began to see it as the land of his fruitfulness. Like, this is great. Look, and so that's why Joseph has moved his family down there and he's blessing them and giving them Goshen and all this great land, right? So, oh, good. Hey, Rodney. Everybody else is like, hopefully you'll find me and tune back in. Um, so it says, now your two sons, Ephraim and Manasseh, who were born to you in the land of Egypt before I came to you in Egypt, are mine now. He's going to adopt them. Jacob, I'm going to adopt Ephraim and Manasseh as my own sons. He says, they are mine as Reuben and Simeon, they shall be mine. Just like my first two sons, Reuben and Simeon. Reuben and Simeon, Ephraim and Manasseh is going to kind of take their place. And he's literally giving them the birthright that should have gone to Reuben. Reuben, as the oldest, is supposed to get a double portion. He doesn't get half the land, and his brothers, 11 brothers, have to get the other half. He just gets two portions. Whenever his property is divided up, the oldest, the firstborn, was always given two portions, because if something were to happen to the other brothers or their wives or something like that, then it was his duty to adopt them and take them in. So he was given extra land just in case something happened. He'd have enough land for his other brothers. So firstborn always got a double portion. It just made sense in civil society. It says, I'm giving that to you, Joseph. You're going to get the double portion. I'm going to adopt Ephraim and Manasseh and count them as my sons. Kind of in place of, they're going to take the top two positions as far as getting land in place of Reuben and Simeon. 1 Chronicles chapter 5. Now, and this is a problem. This is a problem that Jacob had, still thinking that Joseph was not used for a specific reason to save his family, but that God had long-range plans for Joseph, and just not acknowledging his other kids, and maybe God has a different plan. And we get stuck. We think this is God's plan, and really it's over there. So in 1 Chronicles chapter 5, verses 1 through 2, it says, now the sons of Reuben, the firstborn of Israel, he was indeed the firstborn, but because he defiled his father's bed, his birthright was given to the sons of Joseph, the son of Israel, so that the genealogy is not listed according to birthright. When we list them in order, the first two names are Ephraim and Manasseh. It's not listed in the right order yet. And it says, this is 1 Chronicles chapter 5, verse 2. He says, yet Judah prevailed over his brothers, and from him came a ruler, although the birthright was Joseph. I mean, Jacob gave the birthright to Joseph. You're going to get a double portion. I'm going to give one to one son and one to the other. So instead of you just getting one plot of land, I'm just going to adopt your sons, and they each get a lot of land. But the writers of the Chronicles says, actually, God was moving through Judah, and Jacob was blind to that. So even though he gave them that land, God moved through Judah. Okay, as far as the covenant, his covenant promises that he had made to Abraham and Isaac and Jacob are concerned. In Deuteronomy chapter 21, we've read this like 3 times. I'm just reminding us. Verse 15 says, if a man has 2 wives, now Jacob had 4. But Leah and Rachel were his official wives, and then he kind of adopted their maids and had kids with them just so he could have more kids. If a man has 2 wives, one loved and the other unloved, and they all knew how much he loved Rachel and hated Leah. So when this is written down, everybody knows the history. They know who they're talking about. So if you have 2 wives, one loved and one unloved, and they have borne him children, both the loved and the unloved, they both have borne him children. If the firstborn son is of her who was unloved, which was Leah, then it shall be on the day that he bequeaths his possessions to his sons that he must not bestow firstborn status on the son of the loved wife, which had been Rachel, in preference to the son of the unloved, the true firstborn. But he shall acknowledge the son of the unloved wife as the firstborn by giving him a double portion of all that he has. So Reuben was supposed to get the double portion, not Joseph. So the unloved wife, her children gets a double portion. If they get disqualified somehow, Reuben got disqualified, Simeon got disqualified, Levi gets disqualified, then it goes to Judah. Judah was the next one who should have gotten it. If you're mad at Reuben for what he did, and Reuben slept with one of the maids, that's not good. Levi and Simeon killed a bunch of people. That's not good. Judah's next in line. But Jacob just skipped anything that belonged to Leah. I'm ignoring it. Boo. And Rachel's the one. And I'm just saying we have to make sure we don't have a Rachel in our life, in that we're so fixated. I know what God's going to do. I know his plan. He's going to do this, that we miss the real plan that's right in front of us, right? So they make a law, so this will never happen again. But Jacob did it. In Numbers chapter 32, verse 4, um, once they're about to go into the promised land, and all this land's about to, once they finally go back, because as we know, they decided to stay in Egypt. Even though Jacob reminds Joseph, God gave me that land. He appeared to me. When God appears to you and tells you something, he really needs you to get it. And if he's doing that, he's aware, like the bigger the miracle God does to let you know what his will is, the bigger the obstacle you're going to have. That's why he does the big thing. If God is just speaking quietly to you and you go, oh, I wonder if that was God, that means you're just going to have quiet opposition. I want a big, huge sign from God. I want God to really speak. Well, if he does show up all big, that means you're going to have a big problem. For example, when Paul had that dream and the man from, I forget where he's from, but he had a dream and a man was saying, come to Macedonia. And he stretched out his arms, come to Macedonia. He said, oh, that's a sign. I've got to go to Macedonia. Well, he goes to Macedonia. That's the place where they tried to stone. That's one of the many places. But that's the place where they stoned Paul and almost killed him. And you think, but I had this big sign that I was supposed to go there. Yeah, you were supposed to go there. But the reason I gave you this big sign so that when you got there and horrible things happened, you would know that you were supposed to have been there. It wasn't some big mistake. So God gives us a sign proportionate actually to the obstacle that we're going to be facing. So for everyone out there who's like, I barely hear God's voice, he's like, well, that's good. You're not going to have huge obstacles. You are hearing him. God just speaks in very small, subtle ways. That still small voice. That's how he normally speaks. But if God is showing up to you, which is what Jacob says, God appeared to me and said, this is your land. That means there's going to be a huge problem with your descendants really claiming that land. So even though he says that's our land, they decide to stay in Egypt. And we'll look at later why they decided to stay and ignored God. They stayed. So finally, 200 years later, when they go back, 200 years later, when they finally go and claim their land, Reuben is seeing where the wind's blowing. Like, I'm not going to get much. So he decides to stay on the west side of the Jordan. I'm not going to cross over the Jordan. Gad was the oldest son of Bilhah. So Bilhah is Rachel's maid. He's the oldest son. He could tell, I'm not going to get much. All the oldest sons of each wife, and again, he's got really 4 wives, each think, I'm the oldest. I'm the firstborn of this wife. I'm the first, but Gad thought, I'm not going to get much. So Reuben and Gad said, we're going to stay over here. We're not even going to cross over. We're not going to cross over. Numbers 32, verse 4 says, therefore they said, if we have found favor in your sight, let this land be given to your servants as a possession. Do not take us over the Jordan. We're just going to stay in, you know how we've been wandering around the wilderness? We're just going to stay here in the wilderness because we found some really nice land here. So Reuben stays there, and eventually Reuben's land just disappears and gets swallowed up by Gad. Now we know Gad's land because it eventually was called the Gadarenes, and Jesus goes over to Gad's land, and that's where he runs into the demoniac. And the name Gad means legion. It means troop. It means army of people. That's what the name Gad means. Because they named it because like now I've got a whole troop of people. This is Leah in her competition with Rachel. My maid's now having babies, so I got a whole troop of people. I got a whole legion of people. And when Jesus goes to the Gadarenes, that land on the other side of the Jordan, not where God said, I want you to cross the Jordan, I've got land for you. And Gad said, no. Reuben said, no. So we go to the Gadarenes, and Reuben doesn't even have land anymore. His land has just been swallowed up. Jesus asked the demoniac, what's your name? And he says, my name is Legion. You remember me? I'm Gad. What are you talking about? I've been here for a long time. So they decide not to go over. In Joshua chapter 19, verse 9, it says, the inheritance of the children of Simeon was included in the share of the children of Judah. Because remember the first two sons, Reuben and Simeon, Jacob says, I'm going to switch it out. I'm giving Ephraim and Manasseh the two prime spots instead of Reuben and Simeon. So when land is parceled out, Simeon doesn't really get anything. It says the inheritance of the children of Simeon was included in the share of the children of Judah. Judah gets some land, and he just kind of says, here, you just kind of come with me, Simeon, and you eke out a little bit of land there. And so eventually Simeon people kind of disappear. They just get swallowed up in Judah, which is fine. At least they're with Judah. He says, for the share of the children of Judah was too much for them. It's like they had this huge land. It's not really too much, but it was huge. And so Simeon says, oh, I'll just share with you. Therefore, the children of Simeon had their inheritance within the inheritance of that people. So if you were looking for Simeon, they're within Judah. If you're looking for Reuben, he never even crossed over. Neither did Gad. They never crossed over to the land that God had promised him. So when they're passing out the land in Joshua chapter 14, it says the inheritance was by lot, as the Lord had commanded the hand of Moses. Judah got to choose his land because Caleb, Joshua and Caleb are the two spies that went over and said, oh, we can do this. This is good. And Joshua and Caleb, and then the other 10 spies, because they chose a spy from each of the 12 tribes. The other 10 said, ooh, they've got giants. We shouldn't take that land. Joshua and Caleb were the only two people who got kept alive in that age group. 40 years later, Joshua and Caleb, everyone else passed away because they were all the unbelieving people who said, I know God said it, but I don't believe it. God's like, okay, I can't use you, so I'm just going to let you pass away. But he kept Joshua and Caleb alive. Joshua took the land that he had spied out because God said, everywhere you went, when I sent you to spy and you said, yes, this is good, you get that land. So Joshua went south to his land. Jacob went up. Caleb went south. Caleb's from the tribe of Judah. Caleb went south. He claimed that old Judah area. Joshua went north, and he claimed that Ephraim area because Joshua was just descended from Ephraim. And then the rest of them just kind of by lot, by like throwing dice. Okay, you get that land, you get that land, Okay, so it says their inheritance was by lot, as the Lord had commanded by the hand of Moses, for the 9 tribes and a half. And you go, 9.5 tribes? I thought there were 12 brothers. How come it's only 9.5? So it says, for Moses had given an inheritance of 2 tribes and the half tribe on the other side of Jordan. So who's the half tribe? Well, Manasseh, he was also the oldest, right, of Joseph's kids. He's the oldest. He could see that Ephraim was being favored, so half of them didn't want to go. Half of the tribe of Manasseh said, we're still going to get something, so we're going to go. So half of Manasseh, Gad, and Reuben stayed in the wilderness, basically, on that side of the Jordan. They stayed in what's now called Jordan. And the other 9.5 went over. So 9.5. So let's say, so if we have 12, we remove the Levites because the Levites were going to live all over. They became priests, and so they didn't have their own land. So now you got 11 tribes. You replace Reuben and Simeon with Ephraim and Manasseh. You still have 11, but remember Gad, so now you got 10, right? So Reuben and Simeon, you don't get any land. Ephraim and Manasseh, they get your land. That's still 11. You should be 11. But Gad was taken out because he says, I'm not going over there if I'm not going to get really good land. Okay, so now there's 10. So they have to divide up 10. Half of Manasseh said, we're staying over there too because you're going to give the best land to Ephraim, and he's my younger brother. I can't believe my younger brother is getting better than me. So when they came over to Israel, modern day Israel, they really just divided up between 9.5 tribes because 2.5 just stayed on the other side. Fine. So Joshua says their inheritance was by lot as the Lord had commanded the hand of Moses for the 9 tribes and a half. For Moses had given the inheritance of the 2 tribes and a half tribe on the other side of the Jordan. But to the Levites, he'd given no inheritance, right? They got nothing. For the children of Joseph were 2 tribes, Manasseh and Ephraim. And they gave no part to the Levites in the land except cities to dwell in. So the Levites just lived everywhere. Now, so Jacob made this happen right here when he's talking to Joseph. I'm kind of substituting in Ephraim and Manasseh for my first 2 children, Reuben and Simeon. Okay, back to Genesis. Genesis chapter 48, verse 6. He says, your offspring, whom you begat after them, shall be yours. So anybody you have after them, they'll be counted as your kids. So your two oldest kids, Ephraim and Manasseh, I'm adopting them so that they can get a full share, like those, like Judah and Issachar and Zebulun. All your other kids, anybody you have after those two, they're yours, and they'll just be included into Ephraim and Manasseh. He says, they will be called by the name of their brothers in their inheritance. But as for me, when I came from Padan, Rachel died beside me in the land of Canaan on the way. So when I came from Syria, staying with Laban, and we came down, and I ran into my brother Esau, and I thought he was going to kill me, but it turned out he didn't kill me. We continued down, my wife Rachel, and he just kind of has this is not what he was talking about, but suddenly she pops into his mind. He says, my wife Rachel died beside me in the land in Canaan on the way. Like I was because he really was on his way to see his father, Isaac. He was taken, like he hadn't seen his father in at least 20 something years, because he had run away from home because he was afraid his brother Esau was going to kill him, because Esau said, I'm going to kill you. So that was like, oh, I better listen to him. So he runs away. He stays away. He comes back. Now he's got 12 kids. And he's like, I need to see my father again. Now that I know that Esau's not going to kill me. So he's on his way south to see his Isaac, and she dies. Rachel says, died beside me in the land of Canaan on the way, when there was but a little distance to go to Ephrath. So I'm just a mile or two away. We almost got to Ephrath, and that's when God decided to take her. He says, and I buried her there on the way to Ephrath, which is Bethlehem. Rachel was not allowed by God to make it down to Bethlehem, because they would look at that incorrectly in years to come. So it says in Micah chapter 5, verse 2, but you, Bethlehem Ephrathah, though you are little among the thousands of Judah. So Bethlehem is part of Judah's inheritance. And God doesn't want them to confuse Joseph's inheritance, Ephraim, with Judah's inheritance. So he makes sure that Judah has carved out a place, because that's where the Messiah is going to come from. And all the stuff that Jacob's talking about, Joseph, it's your kids, you're going to inherit. He doesn't want people to believe that. And Rachel's the chosen one, and I'm going to bring my wife Rachel down to Bethlehem. And this is before it belonged to Judah. And God said, no, I can't let you do that, because you'll get confused. And I want it to be clear what's going on. It says, but you, Bethlehem Ephrathah, though you are little among the thousands of Judah, yet out of you shall come forth to me the one to be ruler in Israel, whose goings forth are from old and from everlasting. So there's a ruler going to come, but he's been alive forever. Therefore, God's going to give them up. There's going to be when Micah wrote this prophecy, the children of Israel had gone through a bunch of bad stuff. They'd been led astray, mostly by the descendants of Ephraim, Joseph's descendants. So it says, I'm going to give them up. Like, I'm going to let go of them for a while, because they've gone astray, until the time that she who is in labor has given birth. Talking about Mary. Then the remnant of his brethren shall return to the children of Israel. So there's going to be this quiet period where you're not going to hear much from me, until Mary gives birth to this king, the real king. And he's going to do it in Judah. But I want to make Judah special, so you recognize it when he comes, because you're going to be believing he's supposed to come from up north, he's supposed to come from here, he's going to come there, he's supposed to be a descendant of Joseph, and I need to wipe that from your minds. So I'm not even going to let Rachel make it down to Bethlehem, because when the Messiah comes, you're not going to recognize him. He's going to be saying all the right things, but you're going to have this whole fiction in your mind about who he is and what he's supposed to do. And when the Messiah comes, you won't recognize him. So I've got to make it special where he's born, so that it's not confused with all this other stuff that people are thinking and saying. I don't want you, because Jacob just is not listening to me. Jacob had two wives at the same time, Leah and Rachel, and I kept blessing Leah. She had a child, and another child, and another child, and another child. All this time, Rachel's not having a child. Fifth child, sixth child. That was my sign to Jacob. Look, I'm blessing Leah. You keep thinking Rachel's the one. And God does that to us. Look where I am blessing. I know you're waiting for me to bless in this area, but look where I am blessing. Where are you fruitful? People say, I don't know what my ministry is. You're like, but aren't you really good with pets? Or don't you, you're a great cook. I mean, like, you're looking over there thinking your ministry is supposed to be something over there. When look where you are fruitful in your life. Look where how God does bless you. Look at the people who you do help. Whether, oh, I'm good with teaching kids to read. Well, then that's your ministry. Like we're waiting for us to wander around and God's going to give me a church and God's going to look what he is doing. Oh, you drive an Uber and you're witnessing to people and they get saved. That's your ministry. You know, not that it has to stay there, but look where you are fruitful. Look at the areas in your life where you are being fruitful and give it some credit, give it some significance. Don't just ignore it. Well, yeah, well, that's easy for me. Yeah, well, the reason it's easy for you is because God's blessed you in that area. Okay, so anyway, so Rachel passes away before she gets to Bethlehem because God is saying, I don't want that to be confused. Joseph, who's Rachel's kids, that's not who I'm going to use. I'm using Judah, Leah's kid. So I'm not even letting Rachel get down that far. Okay, so he says, my wife, Rachel, she died we were just right outside of Bethlehem and she died. Yes. Then Israel, because it was her time to die, you know, God didn't just kill her because God was mad at her. But I mean, she was going to pass away, but he made sure she passed away right before that, before she got to Bethlehem. Then, Genesis 48, verse 8. Then Israel saw Joseph's sons and said, who are these? Joseph said to his father, now, they are my sons. I have to explain this, whom God has given me in this place. He didn't really not know who they were. It's something that you say during the adoption ceremony, like at a wedding ceremony when the minister says, who gives this woman to be married to this man? And who gives this man to be married to this woman? The minister knows. He's seen them before. He's not confused. Who's doing that? I have no idea. He knows who it is. They've already worked it out. But it's just something you say officially so that person can officially say, I'm giving them away. So we're saying it in front of everybody that this is no longer... they now get to be married and their own people. I am letting go officially. So when he says, and who are these before me? And he says, these are my sons. It's part of the adoption ceremony. He says, whom God has given me in this place. And he said, please bring them to me and I will bless them. Because he says, I'm adopting them right now because I want them to get an equal portion with Judah and Issachar and Zebulun. I want them to get an equal portion with everybody. So I'm going to adopt them as my sons. Now, the eyes of Israel were dim with age so that he couldn't see. Then Joseph brought them near him and he kissed them and he embraced them. So he pushes his two sons for him and he hugs them and he kind of gets them in the wrong order because the oldest is Manasseh. And when he hugs them, he kind of brings them together into one embrace. And now Ephraim is standing in front of Manasseh instead of Manasseh in front of, and he's kissing them. And Israel says to Joseph, I had not thought to see your face, but in fact, God has shown me your offspring. Like I thought I would never see it again. And the things that we've given up on, oh my God, that's never going to work. And God has preserved it for us. I didn't think I was going to see your face, and yet I've been seeing your children's faces. So this is incredible. Although technically he couldn't really see their faces that well. But he's just saying, I didn't think I'd hear or see you again, and yet I'm seeing your children. This is phenomenal. So Joseph brought them from beside his knees. So he had been taken, he was in between, you know, he's sitting on the bed, and he took the kids in between his knees so he can hug them to his chest. So now Joseph is taking him from between his knees. Now, why did he... Taking someone to your knees is a sign when you're adopting someone. Like in Genesis chapter 30, verse 3, when Rachel is wanting to have kids so badly, and God is not giving her kids on purpose, so she gives her maid to Jacob to have kids with. And in Genesis chapter 30, verse 3, so she said, here is my maid Bilhah, go into her, and she will bear a child on my knees, that also I may have children by her. So she's going to bear a child on my knees. Now, she's not literally going to give birth on Rachel's knees. That would be a mess. But on my knees, meaning I will adopt them. I'm going to adopt them, and that way I'll have kids finally. Even though if I can't have kids on my own, I'll have them through the maid. So when Jacob takes the kids in onto his knees, then he's adopting them, right? And then so now Joseph takes them from his knees because he got to rearrange them. Genesis chapter 48, verse 13, it says, and Joseph took them both, Ephraim with his right hand toward Israel's left hand. Okay, so I'm going to take the youngest and put him towards your left hand. It says, and Manasseh with his left hand toward Israel's right hand. So he's rearranging because when he hugged them, he kind of brought them together and got them in the wrong order in Joseph's mind. Jacob knew what he was doing. But so he said, let me take them from you and rearrange them, and I'll give them back to you in the right order. Because whoever you bless with the right hand, that gets the preeminent blessing in their minds, in their culture. If you bless with the left hand, you're getting the lesser blessing, right? So he had it all arranged. Ephraim's going to go toward his left hand, Manasseh toward the right hand. And he brought them, now he brings them back near him. Then Israel stretched out his right hand and laid it on Ephraim's head. So he's like literally crosses over, and who was younger, and his left hand on Manasseh's head, going and guiding his hands knowingly, for Manasseh was the first one. So he's like literally just crosses his hands. And he's praying over them. And he blessed Joseph and said, so Joseph arranged them, and then Joseph bowed his head in prayer. So he didn't notice that his dad had switched hands on it. So he blessed Joseph and said, God, before whom my fathers Abraham and Isaac walked, the God who has fed me all my life long to this day, the angel who has redeemed me from all evil. Now, who's the angel that redeemed him? Because nobody can redeem you other than Jesus. Well, he's talking about when the angel came in Genesis chapter 32:30 and spoke God's words to him. He was God. Angel just means messenger. God's voice came out of the angel. God's words came out of the angel. So and it's like a telephone where the person's voice is coming out the phone. The phone is not really talking to you. The person's talking to you through the phone. So that messenger wasn't really talking to him. God was talking to him through the messenger. So he says, that messenger who redeemed me. In Genesis 32:30, so Jacob called the name of the place Peniel, for I have seen God face to face, and my life is preserved. Thank you. My wife's so wonderful. She brings me water so that I don't pass out immediately. I can pass out later, but not, right now. So, for I have seen God face to face, and my life is preserved. And so he's saying he redeemed me because I was really heading down a bad path, and he changed my name to Israel from Jacob, and began this redemption in me where I was beginning to change. And it has taken him his whole life to finally change. He's still holding on to Rachel, to finally start to see what God is doing. Now, Genesis chapter 48, verse 16, he says, bless these lads. And he's praying, and Joseph is not looking. Joseph doesn't realize that his dad has switched hands. Bless the lads. Let my name be upon them. Right? Let them be called the children of Israel along with everybody else. And the name of my fathers, Abraham and Isaac. So when it says Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, let my names and let their names be upon them, and let them grow into a multitude in the midst of the earth. Genesis chapter 48, verse 17. Now when Joseph saw that his father laid his right hand on the head of Ephraim, it displeased him. So he finally looks up at the end of the prayer, like, wait a minute. So he took hold of his father's hand to remove it from Ephraim's head to Manasseh's head. Like, wait, you got it wrong. And we do that to God. God, you got it wrong. You're blessing the wrong person. Here, this is what you meant to do, God. Hallelujah. We correct God. And Joseph said to his father, not so, my father, for this one is the firstborn. Put your right hand on his head. Now, Jacob knew something about blessing the secondborn, because he was the secondborn, and even in their mother's womb, God had already prophesied that the older was going to serve the younger, and that the younger of these twins coming out, he's actually the one I'm blessing. The older can get an extra portion of land. I have no problem with that. But as far as the covenant blessing that I've made with Abraham, Isaac, and how I'm going to make you a multiple nation and the earth will be blessed, that's going to go through the younger son. Isaac thought he could circumvent that. Here, Esau, go get me some food and I'll quietly bless you. And then that's why Jacob's mom overheard that. I mean, not Jacob. Yeah, Jacob's mom overheard that and said, okay, you got to sneak in and and we think we have to do all this stuff to make God do it right. Like God's going to mess up and God's going to look down. Oh man, I didn't realize that was happening. Okay. And God is so much smarter than us. But okay, I'm going to light 7 candles. There's this stuff that we think we have to do to make sure that God doesn't mess up and do it right. Lord, go to the hospital room and on the 3rd floor. We got to tell them what floor it is because God's going to get lost. Oh, I was on the 1st floor walking around. I didn't realize she's on the 3rd floor. Thank you that you told me that in your prayer. But exactly. So I just blessed the person, and I left. Because I didn't know. But we give God real specific directions in prayer because there are people who will tell you to pray that way. You got to be specific in prayer. Why? God already has the plan. The prayer is for us to get in line with God's plan, not for us to tell God specifically what to do. But I've heard all sorts of stuff because they've got the whole world turned upside down. They think God is our servant. We manifest stuff, we do things, and then God kind of takes our order. Okay, I'll get that done. Wait, slow down. Let me write all that down. And then God does whatever we tell him to do. When it's the opposite. God has plans. God is brilliant. God created the heavens and the earth. He's got wonderful plans for us. And it's up to us to get in line and say, okay, Lord, what do you have planned for me today? And he'll tell us if we just open our minds and quiet ourselves and stop planning so much, we can hear what God is saying for us to do. But we don't have to switch God's hands, and we don't have to do all that stuff. Anyway, so people just make prayer so complicated, and it's not. Thy will be done on earth as in heaven. That's how Jesus told us to pray. But we pray, my will be done in heaven. Let me go to the courts of heaven and tell God what to do. Okay, so he says, not so, Father. But this one is the firstborn. Put your right hand on his head. By the way, I left my phone, and so I won't know. I'll preach for an hour and a half, for 90 minutes instead of the 45 minutes that I wanted to do. Because I started and realized, oh, I don't have my phone. All right. So his father. So he says, not so. This one, his father refused and said, I know my son. I know which one's the oldest. He also shall become a people. The oldest shall become a people. And he also shall be great, but truly his younger brother shall be greater than he. And his descendants shall become a multitude of nations. So it's actually the younger brother that God's going to bless. Okay, so I'm going to stop here halfway through, which is fine. So Jacob knows God is now, he's open now at the end of his life to what God is really doing, right? I know that the oldest is supposed to do this, or I know that men are supposed to do this, and usually women aren't. But in this case, God's going to use that woman. Or I know that adults are supposed to do things and that children aren't. That's what society says. You're too young. But actually, God's going to use that child. I know that this race is normally ones who do that, and that race normally does this. But I'm going to switch it, and I'm going to have someone from this race do that. I'm going to have someone from that. God is free to do what he wants. We have in our minds, hey, it's supposed to go like this. The oldest is supposed to. Or the man or the woman is supposed to. Women usually do that. Well, I'm going to use a man to do. God wants us to know that it's coming from him. So he loves to switch things up. He'll take a poor person and exalt them. He'll take a rich person and bring them low. He'll do whatever he wants so that we don't get a pattern in our head of how it's supposed to happen. We're not supposed to get some pattern. It's got to happen this way. Only the pastor can pray for the sick. Oh, I'm going to use this person who sits in the back of the congregation and have them pray for somebody. Surprise. Because God wants to know, I'm the one doing it. You're not doing it. So I can use anybody I want. So we're going to stop here because even though Joseph's trying to make it happen a certain way, he says, look, trust me. I know now that God can use anything, and we're not going to limit him. So thank you so much. I hope that you found me, even though after the video cut off. I hope that you were able to find me again. I will be preaching in an hour the sermon from the book of Joshua. The church is still online. We're still waiting for the trustees to clean the church, and as soon as they've done that, then we'll be back in our church. But this Sunday we're still going to be online, and I'll keep you posted. And if you want your if you need a tax receipt, by the way, Good Shepherd. Oh, well, you know what? I'll announce this on the Good Shepherd thing. So most of you who are listening, don't go to Good Shepherd. So I'll be preaching on Joshua in an hour. We're in Joshua chapter 9. And then on Wednesday, we're in John chapter 2. And then again, next Sunday, we'll continue with the second half of Genesis chapter 48. So thank you so much for listening in. And let me click that and click that. Click this. Bless my heart. And I have no idea how to end this video. I am looking, and the thing that normally says end video is not there. There it is. Uh-oh. And end. Did it end? No. This is, yes, here we go. There we go.